No? Good morning, everyone. Unakushe Kabo. That's welcome in my local dialect from Sierra Leone, West Africa. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome you to the 7th offering of the Soul of the Next Economy Forum. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be here with us today. My name is Nketi Johnston-Taylor. I'm one of the co-MCs of this conference. I'm the founder and CEO of Mason Vanguard Consulting, which is a local firm in Calgary. Part of the work we do with nonprofits and businesses is provide strategies and solutions that create maximum long-term impact. And isn't that why we're all here today? To figure out how we can create more impact, not just in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, but also worldwide. The roots of the Soul of the Next Economy Forum have been about exploring the role of business in fostering and creating both better business and a better society. This included the field of corporate social responsibility, social entrepreneurship, and poverty reduction in collaboration with business. From these early beginnings, the forum continues to explore ways businesses can positively influence the society. New partners have emerged over the years, and we look forward to the new forms of collaboration. I'm deeply honored to be a part of this forum, and I look forward to learning and sharing ideas with you over the next 5 days. I'll now hand over to the amazing and inspirational Phil, the co-MC of the forum for the next 5 days. Take it over, Phil.
Thank you so much, Nketi. Good morning, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. This forum is unlike any other forum. We heard you loud and clear. We heard your feedback from previous years. We took notes, and you overwhelmingly said, we want less in-person connections. We want more Zoom. I'm totally joking. We've had to pivot and adapt, like all of you, to our new current reality. Normally, we'd be welcoming you with a jazz band playing some chill music as you grab some coffee and tea and get settled in, connecting with old friends. This year will be a much different experience. Instead of doing a regular in-person offering, we've shifted to 5 mornings together, each with a different focus. But not all pivots are bad. These pivots have resulted in some very cool opportunities. Because we're online this year, we have people joining us from all over the country. Let's give a big shout out to all the non-Alberta folks in the room. As well, because of the convenience of being online, we've been able to secure and confirm 95 speakers and experts. That's way more than we would have been possible if we were in person. And another plus, connecting with people is actually easier online sometimes. No need for that awkward icebreaker or conversation starter like, hey, Nketi, how about those Chinook winds, eh? More on that tech piece later and how to connect with some of the other people in the forum. Before I hand things back to Nketi, I should probably introduce myself. My name is Philip Lozano. I work at Momentum, a change-making organization that acts as a bridge by taking an economic approach to poverty reduction and adding a social perspective to economic development initiatives. Momentum, along with Vibrant Communities Calgary, an organization seeking to engage Calgarians in advocating long-term strategies that address the root cause of poverty, and Ambrose University, where higher learning meets higher purpose, are the forum hosts. It really did take a community to pull this off, as we partnered and collaborated with more individuals, organizations, and businesses than ever before. I'm incredibly passionate about the power of business to create inclusive communities with opportunities for all. That is why I'm so thrilled and honored to be a part of this forum. Back to you, Nketi.
Thanks, Phil. So before we jump into the topics for this year's forum, Phil and I are just going to name it. And essentially, we're going to just reflect on what's been going on this year. It's most certainly has been an intense year, and I believe that's putting it mildly. So 2020, as we all know, kicked off with a bang. And while everyone across the world has felt impacts of COVID in some way, Albertans and Calgarians have been hard hit by what's been referred to as a triple threat. So first of all, the onslaught of the COVID-19 pandemic, then the biggest global economic contraction since the 1930s, and an unprecedented collapse in energy prices. And as we know, low energy prices is not a good thing for a province like ours that relies heavily on its energy sector and its revenues. The energy sector has also historically been a huge job creator. And needless to say, Alberta has been hard hit, but we have been resilient. and we will continue to be resilient and build a bigger tent.
As if that wasn't enough, then we experienced as a globe one of the largest protests ever as people stood in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement and against systemic racism. It's also caused us to look at what's happening in our own homes, in our own backyards, both literally and figuratively. And though we weren't the ones voting, we as a nation watched closely as the presidential election of our neighbors to the south took place. Now we're in the midst of a second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic that is coming on strong. There's a lot going on, people. Let's just take a collective deep breath together and be present with all the feelings and emotions that are coming up.
Thanks for that, Phil. Taking that deep breath was actually very effective. The one thing that I know about us is that we are resilient people. As such, now more than ever, we need to be having important, crucial conversations about what we want our economy to look like going forward and what we can and will do to ensure that we create stronger and more resilient communities and strive towards shared prosperity. The Planning Committee has worked extremely hard to put together 5 days of important conversations. Today, our conversation starts with diversity and inclusion. It's no longer a nice to have, but it's a necessity. According to the World Economic Forum, diversity and inclusion is not only a social good, but it also fosters innovation, creativity, and it's very good for the bottom line. And so as a result, so that means we have to have an economy that is diverse and inclusive. And on Tuesday, we'll be focusing on resilience and shared prosperity through employment and education. On Wednesday, the focus will be on building safe and benefit-driven supply chains. And on Thursday, we'll be co-creating our business future. And on Friday, we'll be reimagining what the social sector should look like going forward. Bill?
It had happened once. I had to talk with the mic muted. So perfect. That's out of the way. That won't happen again. Amazing. All right. So we hope those 5 days that Niketi talked about will nourish your soul, provide some hope and future possibilities, and you'll leave inspired knowing that amazing people in our city are working tirelessly to create an economy where there's shared prosperity and enough for all. We hope that you're able to stay and engage throughout the entire week. Before we continue on further, I would like to take a moment to thank our sponsors. A big thank you to our associate sponsors, Chandos, Connect First, and Suncor, patron sponsor, Service. Do please connect with them and check out their exhibits along with other sponsors in the exhibits tab above. There are also a few housekeeping announcements I'd like to share with all of you. We want to make sure you have a great experience with this virtual conference. If you're watching this now, it means you've successfully found how to use the agenda or the live watch now tab at the top. If at any point your computer crashes or you get bounced out of the room, just go to the watch live now button in the top bar on swap card. For those of you who feel you need some additional training on using this platform, we get it. There's a lot of tech. It can sometimes feel overwhelming. We do have some optional platform training sessions and Q&A sessions, 8 a.m. every day this week. So if you're feeling a little overwhelmed, check that out tomorrow morning. Also, please be sure to visit the help tab at the top as well. Now let's briefly talk about how we can connect with one another. It's best to use Chrome or the Firefox browser. For the best internet connection, try to be close to your router, have a few tabs open, have fewer devices using your Wi-Fi, and if possible, try hardwiring your connection as well. I'd also encourage you to listen out for some of the virtual meeting reminders of how to use the platform throughout the conference. This is all on the slide. I think that's it for housekeeping. Maybe a couple more things. Niketi, I'll pass it back to you.
All right. Thanks, Phil. That was very, very useful. I remember when I first logged on, it was very challenging because I had multiple tabs open and my computer kept crashing. So that was very useful. So now I want you all to look to the right. Look to your right. There's a live discussion box. Do you see it? Please nod if you do. Okay. All right. There you can chat or ask questions. You can also leave a comment. In fact, go right ahead and introduce yourself and let us know where you're tuning in from. Leave a reaction.
Awesome. Hey, Niketi, random question. You seem like a pretty awesome person. Do you just consult? What else do you do?
Oh, thanks, Phil. You're too kind. I also teach economics at Ambrose University and at St. Mary's. And I work as a program coordinator at the Justice Sector Constellation. And that's one of the pillars of Calgary's Enough for All strategy.
Whoa, Niketi, you're a powerhouse. How can I connect with you or one of the other attendees or one of the 95 experts and guest speakers we have?
I'm glad you asked, Phil. Do feel free to connect with me on Swapcard. There you'll find my LinkedIn profile and some more information about me. And you can also connect with Phil on Swapcard and on LinkedIn as well. This forum is really all about creating connections. So I strongly encourage you to reach out and connect to one another and go to the attendees tab. You can message or video call people directly, find their LinkedIn profiles, see what sessions they're speaking at. And our plenary sessions, which are keynotes, keynote panels, etc., will be right here. And breakout sessions or roundtable discussions will be on Zoom. And the Zoom link to join is found on that session page. Be prepared to show your video for roundtable discussions. If I have to show my video, you have to see my face, and we want to see yours too. And all plenary sessions will also be recorded today and will be available for viewing until November 22nd, unless you purchase the extended access. I will also like to urge everyone to please be present and engaged. Limit as much multitasking as you can. And lastly, Phil, what's the deal with these breaks during the forum? Looking at the schedule, looks like it's full on. Tell me more.
Yep, it does look full on. And so we are all part of this forum called the Soul of the Next Economy Forum. We thought it would be important to ensure that we provide as many opportunities to bring in soul, bring in heart, bring our entire selves to these discussions. It's stressful times we live in, and everyone is feeling Zoom fatigue. So we encourage all of you to take care of yourself. Throughout the week, do what you need to stay engaged. Don't forget to stand up, stretch, look away from the screen, and give your eyes a break. Feel free to grab a snack while you listen to speakers. And if you need to take a break, go ahead and take one. You'll notice that the agenda each day looks quite full, but be sure to take care of your needs, even if the schedule doesn't have a formal part about that.
Well, as we get ready for our courageous conversations, we need to reflect and ground ourselves each day by feeding our souls. I have the honor of co-emceeing with a powerful and inspiring Tim Fox for the day. So without further ado, Tim, please introduce yourself, say a few words, and take us to the next item on the program.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Nkedi and Phil, for that awesome introduction. I just greeted you in the Blackfoot language, my ancestral language. I am originally from the Kainai Nation. It's a part of the 60 Gates at the BU or the Blackfoot Confederacy. My family comes from the Ekepukeks clan, and in English that translates to the Many Children's clan. I currently work for a settler-created philanthropic organization called the Calgary Foundation, and my role there is to help facilitate a change process and find ways to mobilize the work of reconciliation and decolonization. And then just most recently, we have, as an organization, also made a commitment to promoting equity within the fabric of our practice and our process. And so I'm also happy to be taking on some of that work as well. In the work of reconciliation and decolonization, I have been learning a lot. One of the lessons that I have gained from many teachers in my life and in this journey over the last couple of years talks about the creation of space. And I think that when we consider the creation of space, it's more crucial to pay attention to how we're holding on to spaces, especially in a virtual setting. So I wanted to invite a couple of notions for everyone to think about as we enter into this dialogue over the next couple of days. And the first notion is around safe space. I feel like the language of safe space has emerged a lot lately, especially with the dialogue surrounding Black Lives Matter and racial equity. What I have come to learn in most recent months is that it's actually impossible to create safe space. So as an example, I could be a facilitator and profess to be creating safe space. And I could say, guys, you know what? I'm making a safe space. But that space is only safe to the standard that I set. Doesn't mean that everyone attending or showing up to that space is going to feel completely safe. So the next notion that we talk about is brave space. So really fostering elements of bravery. And elements of bravery invite certain levels of vulnerability, bravery to be brave and courageous in the difficult, challenging questions and in the difficult, challenging conversations that we might pursue. So we're going to foster these principles of bravery over the next couple of hours and this morning, and then hopefully carry that spirit and intention of bravery throughout the rest of the week. So just to list off some principles of brave space, I want to invite that we are present in the room and with each other. So that just means over the next couple of hours, we're asking for your full undivided attention. I know it's really easy to be distracted with our phones and other emails, but we're about to get into some really crucial dialogue with some speakers who are making themselves vulnerable, who are being brave enough to invite some challenging conversations into our lives and into our perspectives. So we ask that you be fully present with us. And then we ask that you are open to new ideas, ways of thinking, and feedback. We listen deeply, are curious, and seek new knowledge and understanding. We ask that you bring awareness to your biases, assumptions, and judgments. I recently learned from a good friend, Elise and Cora, that if you have a brain, you have bias. So we just ask that you bring awareness to your biases in the spaces of these conversations. We hold a space of trust and confidentiality. We focus on possibility and see obstacles as opportunities for learning. We acknowledge and appreciate each other's gifts, strengths, and contributions. We hold brave space for courageous conversations. We challenge ideas and not people. Too often do we invite a thought into a conversation, and that isn't sort of met with acceptance, and then we get defensive, and then a breakdown of communication happens. And our intention isn't to fracture relationships. We just ask that you enter into these conversations with an open mind and an open heart. We're so socialized to remove our emotions from the way we think. And so we're asking you to connect your heart and your mind in the next couple of hours and in the week ahead. Allow discomfort to lead your growth. Lots of these conversations, especially around diversity, equity, and inclusion, for some folks new to the work and to that discussion, can be a little bit uncomfortable because we do surface elements of truth and cultures of supremacy, which could be hard for some people to hear. So we just ask that you allow that discomfort to lead your growth. And then finally, take accountability for your own learning. There's a huge difference between knowledge extraction and knowledge mobilization. And we're really hoping that you are inspired to not only increase your level of understanding based on what many of the speakers and the panelists have to share with you for the rest of the week, but you're actually doing something to mobilize that information that you're learning. And then finally, another teaching from Elise, and I'll end here, that I have gained is this notion around accountable space. So we have safe space, which I feel is impossible to create, brave space, which is the principles that I just took you through, and then accountable space. Accountable space recognizes that those racialized folks like myself and the rest of the MCs and some of the panelists here have no choice but to show up every single day in this society with elements of bravery. Just because of the dominant culture and narrative that has helped to shape a belief system and a pattern that is very harmful in this contemporary time, that we really have no choice but to be brave. So accountable spaces suggest that those entering into this dialogue do have to mobilize some of this knowledge and be accountable to the things that we are saying, the inspiration and the teachings that we are hoping to invoke in all of our participants moving forward. And so I'll just leave it with that, and hopefully that helps to set some of the tone for the discussions that we are about to get into.
See? Thank you so much, Tim, for that. That was wonderful. See, I told you, he is powerful and inspiring. That certainly has set the tone for our upcoming discussion for the rest of the day and for the rest of the conference. Next up, I would like to introduce the president of Ambrose University, Dr. Gordon Smith, to bring greetings and to introduce Indigenous elders Florence and Wallace Alexson to open us in a good way. Okay, over to you, Gordon. Doctor.
Thank you, Nkita, and thank you, Phil. I'm delighted to be part of this morning and have the opportunity to greet each of the participants who are joining us this year for this very special event. We take great pride at Ambrose University in the privilege that we have to host what we've referenced already many times this morning as a conversation about what it means to do good business in a way that serves the civic well-being of our communities, our cities, our province, our country, and our world. And we trust that today will be productive and fruitful for you. As she noted, as Nikita noted, you have busy lives. And so taking some time aside in order to be able to be part of this conversation is something we deeply appreciate. I, for one, know that our students each year value a chance to be in conversation with business leaders from this immediate community and beyond in ways that is both informative and encouraging to them in the best way possible. It is important for us to acknowledge that we are co-hosts this year, and I celebrate that Momentum and Vibrant Communities Calgary are co-hosts with us, and we thank you to both of these organizations for partnering with us to foster this event this year, and ask that indeed part of your involvement will be that the net outcome of this is that your organizations will flourish even more. Thank you for partnering with us. It's vitally important that as we begin, even though it's a virtual event this year, even though we're not on the lands of Ambrose University, quite literally, nevertheless, it's important for us to acknowledge that Ambrose University sits on the traditional lands of the Blackfoot nations of Southern Alberta. And we are grateful for their hospitality, and we are committed to the ways in which we can live with truth and justice as people of Treaty 7. We acknowledge the First Nations Piikani, Siksika, and Kainai peoples, and our neighbors, the Stoney Nakoda and the Tsuut'ina. And we also recognize that we are on the traditional lands of Métis Nation Region 3. Ambrose University takes seriously the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, especially those recommendations that pertain to academic institutions such as our own, and institutions such as our own that have a religious identity. We are on a journey, no doubt. We've not arrived yet where we need to be on this journey. We're still learning, and we want to learn with you and with leaders of the First Nations and Métis communities, as well as with business leaders in this region and beyond, in terms of how we can respond to the TRC, to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and express our commitment to both hospitality and justice. We'll say it again. We are committed to truth and reconciliation, and ask each one who is part of this conference to join us on this journey, asking indeed how businesses can flourish, reflecting this commitment to both truth and reconciliation. This year, as we begin our conference, we are privileged to have two elders, as was mentioned, Wallace and Florence Alexson, who are going to bring words of wisdom and blessing. And we turn to them now and look forward in these next few minutes to what they have to bring our way.
Good morning. All my relations. Nice to see each and every one of you today. As many as I can see, anyway. Anyway, my name is Wallace, given name. My Indian name is Man of the Earth. In my language, that's how we say. We are from the Kakewishtahoe Nation, First Nation, and that's in a little place called Broadview, Saskatchewan. Just north of Broadview, Saskatchewan, we have 4 reservations. That's where we hail from, born and raised. But my wife and I, we moved to the Calgary area in 1974, and since that time, we've made our home here, raised our families, and it's such a beautiful place, and we got along well with the native community around here. They've accepted us into their area, the Blackfoot people, Treaty 7, and yeah, we sit on a few of the elders groups and help wherever we can with this kind of situations. And with that, my wife is not here right now. She's running the kids to the school bus. We still have little ones at our age. we have a 9 and a 10-year-old that are going to school. They live with us 24/7. Anyway, with that, get to let you know who I am, and we speak the Cree Sutu language, and that's what I'm going to be doing my prayers in this morning. And I'll be asking Creator to help us with what we're about to embark on here. With that said, I'm going to go into the prayer, and then I'm going to sing a thank you song or a good morning song for you. I have my smudge going here. Each and every time we have a ceremony, we always start with smudge and do our prayers, cleanse the air, cleanses everything. So virtually, you can, if you don't have a smudge going, I'll just show you that I have mine going here so that, you can, the smoke goes all over the place. So it'll reach you eventually someplace, sometime today. Now I'm going to say a prayer. And then when I'm finished with my prayer, I'm gonna sing the song, and then we'll be ready to go on with the rest of the meeting. Ahone mishumis. Ginanishka ganagdituana kanage guni mishumis. Kichimi gwechigo kamina tutman. Creator God, we thank you for coming to sit with us today. We thank you for everything you do, Mushum. Inanishka kanagdituana kanagego. I want to ask for good things to happen to my people here, all my relations, Mishomis. We ask that you look after us, help us with our way of doing things here in this meeting and what we're about to embark on today. You're the only one that knows how to do this. We ask you to come and sit with us and bless us, look after us. Ask each and every one of you to say a silent prayer for yourselves and your families when I'm singing the song. Thank you for coming to look after us. Thank you for checking in on us at all times. We ask you to help us, lead us in this endeavor that we're about to embark on. Thank you for coming to look after your people. We are small people in a vast sea of sand here. Help. We need your help today. Miigwech coming to man. Hey, Miigwech. Thank you for listening to me. Hey, and a good morning to all. Thank you. And here's the better half.
Hi.
She's back.
I'm sorry I missed everything. I had to drive the kids to school. So that's my daily chore. Thank you.
Good to see you guys.
It's just one person.
Have a good rest of the day. Thanks.
Thank you, Elders Wallace and Florence. We are so fortunate to have your presence, and we invite you to participate with us for the rest of the day. I would also like to acknowledge that we are sitting on Treaty 7. Let's proceed with our day with diversity and inclusion. COVID-19 had intensely exposed the marginalization and alienization that many of our neighbors in Canada experience in their lives. Together, we're going to facilitate a challenging, generative, personal, and organizational conversation on the positive impact of an intentional adoption of and implementation of diversity and inclusion in everything that we do. We have broken down our morning into 4 parts: a keynote followed by a small discussion, a panel on the importance of diversity and inclusion, breakout groups to discuss how we can each advance this extremely important work, a presentation by Stone Olafson. We will be looking at data they have gathered during the pandemic on how Canadians and Albertans specifically are feeling. The data will inform how we will move forward. As a fellow member of the Alberta Chamber of Black North, it is with great honor that I introduce Dahabo Ahmed Omar, the Executive Director of Black North Initiative, our opening keynote speaker. Dahabo has been a champion for diversity and inclusion for decades and has won a number of notable awards. Before we hear Dahabo speak, please watch the short video from Black North Initiative that speaks to the experiences of some Black people here in Canada and the work that Black North actually does. I would really encourage you to visit Dahabo's profile on Swapcard. Welcome, Dahabo. Now let's watch the video.
I had reservations about attending Queen's Law. When I received my acceptance, I notified some of my undergraduate professors. "Congratulations on getting accepted to the White School," one of the professors said. Despite this, I still chose to attend. My first week of law school was an immense culture shock. I thought I would meet at least one other Black law student, but soon realized I was the only one.
Growing up, my parents stressed the importance of having to work harder because I was Black. They prepared me for many challenges that I would face as a minority, and until recently, I believed these challenges would always exist. I received a full scholarship to study at the University of Western Ontario for my undergraduate degree. There were only 5 Black students of 180 students in the program. I passed all 3 levels of my CFA exams and recently graduated in the top 3 in my class in my MBA program at the Richard Ivey School of Business. Yet, I was not able to get phone calls or coffee chats with any of the major banks. Many of my peers and classmates reached out to the same person within a firm. That person only agreed to have phone calls and coffee chats with the white students, even though they often had fewer qualifications. Not having an opportunity to network and build relationships creates a significant handicap in the job search process. It's surprising, having graduated at the top of my class at one of the best business schools in the country, that merely networking as a minority can be such a daunting challenge.
My brother, Samuel Osei, was a Canadian University graduate of Ghanaian descent. He was an A+ student and scored in the top 5% of his class in his chartered accountant exams in Ontario. After graduating university, he entered the workforce full-time in the corporate sector. He often expressed his negative experiences as being the only Black man working in his department. Samuel's mental health deteriorated in a way that is indescribable. In August of 2012, my brother Samuel took his own life. Amongst his last words to me were that he couldn't take it anymore. Anti-Black racism is not only a public health issue, it's a matter of life and death.
So hello everyone, my name is Tahabo Ahmed Omer. I am the Executive Director at the Black North Initiative. Thank you so much for inviting me and for including me in your spaces. I was listening through and, at the beginning, one of the things that resonated with me was around how do we create a space that not only is safe, but also accountable. And so some of the pieces that I will be speaking about today are really gut-wrenching stats, things that are happening within the Black community that I think is important for us to know in order for us to adjust them. As you can see, I am a Black woman. I'm also a Muslim woman. I'm a refugee. I'm a daughter. There are so many identities that I carry. And one of the biggest challenges for the Black community is really around the intersectionality between the challenges and barriers we face when it comes to education, when it comes to the justice system, when it comes to community safety and wellness, housing. The Black community generally is suffering in every single sector. Black North Initiative was started by business leaders in our community, individuals who have been working very diligently to ensure that these issues of anti-Black systemic racism are at the forefront. One of the biggest things that we've been looking at is what role does corporate Canada play in these issues? What can corporate Canada do to combat, to tackle, and to eradicate anti-Black systemic racism? I am one individual in the midst of over 150 people within the Black North Initiative that are working diligently every single day to ensure that we are doing what is necessary to end this. This summer has been one of the most difficult summers for all of us. We are facing the biggest global pandemic, but we are also facing the biggest pandemic in our racial tensions. One of the issues that I think is predominantly rising more and more is the idea that why are we having this conversation in 2020? These issues have been here and amongst us and living in our quarters for generations. I want you to ask yourself, how come we are having these conversations today? What can we do to ensure that we are no longer talking about this and that it is included, the way that we live is included in the fabric of our lives every single day? And that the reach of equity and diversity and inclusion is no longer something that's so far from us, but something that is embedded in our everyday. And so I'll ask for the slide to go to the next, just to the next page, please. The reality right now within the Black community is that we are facing some of the most pervasive racism that you can think of. 83% of the Black Canadians right now say that they are treated unfairly. But half of the non-Black Canadians believe that discrimination against Black people is no longer a problem. That's half of our non-Black community who thinks that these issues don't exist anymore. Can you imagine that for a moment? If I can get you guys to go to the next slide. The reality right now within the Black community is that, it's important for us to look at all the different facets of how discrimination and racism really presents itself. We know right now that there's a reduced likelihood of Black Canadians succeeding in job hiring process. We also know that there's an impaired career progression and lower levels of integration for Black Canadians. We also know that there's an inferior access to physical and mental health care. Right now, 29% of Black Canadians, and specifically women, do not have a family doctor. If you can imagine that, not being able to have a medical practitioner be aware of your life, be aware of the things that are happening, be aware of your conditions, be aware of your historical context, and be able to give you appropriate healthcare. We also know that there's a lower educational achievement for Black students in schools. Right now in 2019 and 2020, we are facing the highest rates of suspension and expulsion in Black students. And as you all know, Black Canadians are over-policed and face a disproportionately high rate of racial profiling. Next slide, please. As of July 2020, Black Canadians, if you can believe, are 2 times more likely to be unemployed than non-minority Canadians. The Black unemployment rate is 8 points higher than white rate. And with Black women being disproportionately affected, our women right now are unfortunately unable, even in the midst of a global pandemic, to provide for their families. Have no idea and don't know where the next meal is coming from. As I give you these stats, and I know they're triggering, and I know it's hard to hear these things, but I want you to put yourself in the moment that we're all in. And imagine these stats are your stats. Imagine that these stats are a reflection of what you are living. Next slide. We know right now that university-educated Black Canadians earn on average 80 cents for every dollar earned by their white peers. It's 20% less earning power. It's 20% less opportunities to grow and to develop and to learn and to provide for their families. That's 20% less of economic empowerment. 20% is what we are dealing with right now. Next slide. Now, the earning gap only shows us that Black Canadians do not have the same return on educational investment as white Canadians. I can tell you that when I arrived in Canada, and I came from Civil War, The thing that came out of my mouth, my mother and my dad's mouth every day was, you have to get your education. You have to get your education. You have to get your education. It was key. It was important. In our community, getting your education means having a future. Getting your education means ensuring that you can provide for your multi-generational families. Getting your education meant that you had a chance at life. But right now, on average, Black workers earn $12,400 less compared to other Canadians who have the same qualification. The wage discrimination and occupational segregation cost the Black community $1.5 billion annually. Next slide. One of the things that we are considering more than more now is how do we deal with this racial discrimination? What are some of the things that we can do to reduce that gap? There were a few pilot projects that started a couple of years ago where we would try to remove the names, blind CVs is what they called it. And they would remove the names off the CV to see how far within the screening process that candidate got. And that's because we know that racial discrimination resume screens with Black names getting up to 12 times fewer callbacks in a study that was done in Toronto. White resumes with no criminal record are 3 times more likely to get callbacks than Black resumes. White resumes with a criminal record have 12 times more callbacks than similar Black resumes. And wait for it, white resumes with a criminal record are 1.5 times more callbacks than Black resumes with clean records, just because of your name. This is the level of racial discrimination that we are dealing with. That your name, the first identity that's been given to you as a person, prevents you from having a chance, from having a job, from providing for your family and for yourself. Just your name. This is before you enter that interview room, before you speak to your potential manager, before you go through an exam. This is at the onset. Your name can prevent you from getting a job. Next slide. Half of Black employees in Canada right now are reporting facing discrimination when it comes to promotion. Only 39% of Black Canadians agree that their organization has the right mechanism in place to ensure promotion decisions are free of bias. I love what I heard earlier, that if you have a brain, you have a bias, because we all do. This is part of the construction of the person. From the moment you are born, biases just occur. And sometimes they're so embedded in us that we don't even realize that we are. One of the things that I think is important for me to say in this space is, I think that unconscious bias is not something that we can control because it's there, but it is something that we can prevent. And unconscious bias is something that I truly believe that we can combat. Because anti-Black systemic racism is when you don't check the unconscious bias. Anti-Black racism is a result of not understanding and picking up on the fact that you do have a bias, and that you can realize it in the moment that is what is happening, and that you do what needs to be done to ensure that that bias is not preventing other individuals from succeeding. If we're going to truly create a world of equality, we're going to have to understand that first. That when you're in an interview and you're speaking to someone, this person comes with all sorts of facets, is carrying multitude of identities. And if we're truly going to create a sense of belonging, we're going to have to take that person for who they are in its entirety. Inclusion is that. Inclusion is ensuring that you understand that this person has an intersectionality of identities. Equity is when you create an environment that allows that person to grow. And when we have 39% of Black Canadians telling us that there's no mechanism in their workspaces that allows them to have free bias promotional opportunities, that's because the environment that they're in is not equitable. They're in the environment, they've been included in the environment, but now they can't grow. Next slide, please. Currently, there are no Black C-suite executives in Canada, in the 7 largest energy companies, in the 6 largest banks, in the 5 largest telecom providers, and in the 2 largest life insurance. If you can imagine that, right now, Black Canadians represent 0.8% in senior executives. And in the Canadian population, they represent 3.5%. One of the most interesting things I heard recently was that when we look at these targets, they are the lowest level of achievement. It's the lowest level achievement to say to yourself, I'm going to get to this target because that's what the population is rated at. The issue is not that. The issue is if you're going to create an environment that's going to allow people to grow, is that you will surpass that percentage. You will ensure that everyone who is available in the market, who has experience, who has the skill set, is able to get into these roles. The fact of the matter is diversity is not just a strength, it is an asset. If I'm in a workspace as Tahabo, I can tell you that I will not only bring my experiences as a professional, but also bring my life experiences. My understanding of the BIPOC community is very, very different than someone who's not part of the BIPOC community. And if we're truly going to serve the diversity of our country, then we must be reflective of that and understand that those of us who are from diverse communities bring that asset into the workspace, that the ideas that we bring, that the solutions that we bring, and you know, the strategies, the ways that we do the work is going to be very different, but it is going to be an asset. Next slide. So it's not just in the private sector. There are 0 Blacks right now who are federal deputy ministers and federal court judges. When we know that the percentage of Blacks within the criminal justice system and within the justice system generally is at a disproportionately high rate. And whether it's in the Supreme Court of Canada, whether it's the Bank of Canada Board, whether it's the offices of federal parliament, whether it's the head of the armed forces, there are no Blacks. There are no Blacks. Next slide. So you've heard this through the news, and I'm sure you've heard it from your own neighbors or communities. But COVID-19 has hit the Black community, the minority community, the hardest. And not because COVID is racist, because COVID isn't racist. All COVID did was that it heightened and highlighted the challenges that already existed. The infection data by neighborhood right now, and this is looking at areas in Toronto, Black residents right now are 11% in Humber Heights, Westmount, 33% in West End. Same goes for Yonge and Eglinton, same goes for the Beaches, same goes for East End, Danforth. Communities with the 5 lowest rates of infection, 4 out of 5 neighborhoods are less than 6% Black. 4 out of 5 are less than 6% Black. Next slide. So I said this to you earlier around the health outcomes of Black Canadians. Black Ontarians right now have the worst health outcomes than white Ontarians, driven by lower access to healthcare. There are 3 times higher rate of diabetes among Black women in Ontario compared to white women. 1.7% and 1.7 times higher rate of hypertension among Black women in Ontario compared to white women. And if you can believe it, 60% higher rate of psychosis among segments of the Black population compared to the general population. Imagine, these are individuals that are unable to get jobs that are going to be prosperous for their future. These are individuals that are unable to be treated fairly in the job market. And then on top of that, they're facing worse health outcomes than most. And these are the people in our community that we expect that they do well in school, that they do well at work, they are healthy, that they take care of their families, that they go out there every single day and do what needs to be done to provide and serve for their own. How can they do that? And I'll tell you that it's very important that throughout every moment of this conversation today, that you feel a sense of duty, that you look at these stats and you listen to everyone who has spoken and understand that you as an individual have a responsibility to do something. Because these are some of the most grimmest stats I have ever seen. Next slide. Black women are nearly 4 times less likely to have a family doctor than the average Ontario woman. Right now, 29% of Black women do not have a family doctor, compared to 8% of all women in Ontario. When they represent a fraction of 3.5% of the population in Canada. That's 29% of Black women who don't know who to go see when they're having a health issue, who don't know who to go see when their child is sick, when they're feeling a symptom that they're unaware of, when they have preconditions. These are 29% of our women don't have someone who can check in on them, who can ensure that they have the help that they need, who know their histories, and who can adequately serve them. Next slide. There are fewer Black Torontonian students graduate from high school than their white students. We're looking at 84%. That's 84%. The dropout rates for Black students are 2 times more than white students. You know, when I was in school, so you come to the country that everyone tells you is the land of opportunities. And you're in school and you are thinking of opportunities. You're thinking about all the ways that you can achieve your dreams. And then you have a system that doesn't allow you to do that. There's a system that tells you that you shouldn't take this course, that you should go into applied, or that you should try to do something a little less difficult, a little less hard. My niece the other day, last week actually, spoke to me about a session that she had with her counselor. She's 15 years old, grade 11. And she tells us, the counselor, that she wants to be a lawyer. Now, my niece is someone that could be a lawyer. She argues everything. And she's got a solution for everything. And she will win every time. And so when she said that to me, I chuckled because I thought, yeah, you'd be a good lawyer. But that day, I can tell you that she was not feeling okay. She was sitting in her room, and every time I go to my sister's house, she'll run down and come and hang out with me and tell me all about all sorts of things that she's doing. And that day she didn't come down. So I went in her room and just asked her how she was doing. She tells me, I wanted to take this course and I'm not sure if I should. And I said, well, why aren't you sure? She goes on to give me a description of the conversation that she had with her counselor. And at the end of that conversation with her counselor, she felt like she couldn't take the class anymore. This is something that she was excited about, something she had heard from a peer of hers that was older than her and had given her some good feedback about how the class was amazing, and she wanted to take it. At the end of that conversation, she felt like she probably wouldn't get a good grade in that course. She asked me what classes I took and if there were easy courses. I can't tell you how much that broke my heart. That my niece was being told to take an easy course. That she was being put in a box at the age of 15. There are multiple reasons why our kids, Black kids specifically, are dropping out. One of the reasons is that the school system isn't built in a way that addresses their needs. The school system isn't built in a way that allows them to grow, to achieve their dreams, and to tell them the opportunities exist and you can achieve it as long as you work hard. And it wasn't that. The feedback she got wasn't that she would do well if she worked hard. It was that she wouldn't do well because she just wouldn't. And so I want you to think about that. I want you to think about coming home and talking to your child about an encounter of that sort. And how do you explain it? Because the question she asked me is, why would she say that? Have you taken this course? Is it too hard? Do you think I would fail? I had zero answers for her, except to tell her that I knew she could if she wanted to. I knew she could if she put her mind to it, and that it was dependent on her, that no one should be able to tell her what she can and cannot do, and that if she worked hard, she would get there. Now, I don't know if she believed me in the moment. It's only been a couple of days, but I can only imagine what she's feeling as a 15-year-old young woman who has barely had an opportunity to live and to understand the world, to be told that this is the box that you fit in. Next slide. Black students in Toronto are expelled 4 times more often than their representation in their student body. There's a report that I did a couple of years ago through a high school. A few parents approached me and said to me, Tahabo, our children are going through some issues, and we'd like to document the issues. These are 22 Black parents, Black and biracial parents. And I can tell you that throughout the entire 2 months that I was drafting the report and I was documenting the incidences, there was a commonality in all of them. These were all students that were Black or biracial. These were all students that came from difficult circumstances, that lived in housing, and that unfortunately were being expelled or suspended at a disproportionately high rate than their white peers. I'll give you an example. One of the mothers had 2 daughters. 2 of the daughters were in the same school, but 3 years apart. The older daughter, every other day, would get a note in her agenda. And the note would always say, your daughter did this today, your daughter did that. Every single note were the most menial of incidences. She spoke in class. She didn't close the door when she came back from the bathroom. She passed the note to her friend. These are things that we've all done. These are not things that prevent us from doing well in school. These are children. They're going to be children. But what I noticed is that every moment that a note was written, it would escalate. It would escalate and it would escalate very quickly. And unfortunately, the fact of the matter is that Black children are looked at as criminals in the making. At such a young age, they're looked at differently than other children. At such a young age, they get expelled more frequently than others. This is, and for those of you that don't necessarily work in the school system, but when you get expelled from a school, most times you get expelled from the school board, which means any of the schools that are in your area, your child can't go to anymore. So what does that mean for the parents? For the mother who doesn't have a family doctor, and who has a job where she's not growing in, and then has a child that's been expelled. What does that mean for that family? That means they may have to move. They may have to get a place that may be more expensive than their place that they're in right now. It may mean the mother is now further from her workplace as she was before. One incident, one issue, one challenge in a Black family impacts everything else. Next slide. The Black community in Toronto perceives significant bias in policing. Right now, police can be trusted to treat my ethnic group fairly. White residents will say 74% of them will say yes. In the Black residents, it's 26%. There's a 48-point percentage difference. 48. Toronto City's police officers are honest. 72% of white residents agree with that. Only 41% in the Black community agree with that. And it doesn't end there. Let's go to the next slide. Although Black Torontonians make up only 9% of the population, they represent 32% of cases involving police firearm, 36% of cases involving police use of pepper spray, 37% of cases involving police strikes, 41% of cases involving police grounding or other force, 46% of cases involving police taser use, and 57% of cases involving police dog. Can you imagine? Now I want you to go back into the example I just gave you. It's a Black mother. She doesn't have a family doctor. She has a job she can't grow in, and her child has just been expelled. And imagine that mother or that father now having interaction with police where they potentially may face pepper spray, taser use, a police dog, a firearm, or some sort of force. This is what the Black community is dealing with. The multitude and intersectionality of challenges and barriers. And if we can go to the next slide, please. Black and Indigenous populations are overrepresented in the prison police populations. We know this. Indigenous federal prison population went from 17.6% in 2001 to 30.4% in 2020. Now, Black federal prison population in the last 10 years has increased by 80%. Since 2010, Indigenous inmates make 52.1%. White inmates are 23.5%, gone down. Indigenous women account for 42% of women inmates in Canadian prisons. Black inmates, even though 3.5% of our population in Canada represent 8% of inmate population and 16% of use of force cases by corrections officers. Where can the Black community be safe? At the family doctors, at their work, in their schools? Where can they be safe? Next slide, please. And Black Torontonians, I'll tell you, are even more likely to be killed by police. 9% of Toronto's population is Black. 70% of civilian death in police shootings are Black people. 70% are Black people. Overall, Black people in Toronto are 20 times more likely to be shot dead by the police than white people. I can tell you that for myself, for those that I know, driving is a consistent fear. Getting out of your house or leaving your job and going to your car You are scared because you know that this could be you. You may be one of those individuals in that 70% bracket. You get pulled over for whatever reason, and then you don't go home. You don't go home. Driving. I said to you earlier that having your name in a resume can prevent you from having a job. Driving can kill you if you're Black. Next slide. So these are resources and research that we've looked into. At McKinsey & Company, they did a study in 2020 and found that gender and ethnically diverse executive teams are 36% more likely to outperform their peers. So it's not only the right thing to do, it's also the smart thing to do. At Lloyd Banking Group, the Race Action Plan targets to increase Black representation in senior roles to at least 3% by 2025, which is amazing. And at Moody's, the underrepresentation in financial services of ethnic minorities, and in particular the Black staff, and the senior level is a social issue that is subject to increasing scrutiny by investors, regulators, politicians in several countries. It is important for us to understand what these stats show us and what these reports show us. I can go to the next slide, please. Our supervision of financial institutions right now should include assessing their management reputation risk, as reputational events can impact institution financial position. There are a few people who've said a number of things. Tennis superstar Naomi Osaka announced on social media that she will not play in the Western and Southern Open semifinals on Thursday. And what she had written was, watching the continued genocide of Black people at the hands of police is honestly making me sick to my stomach. And later on Wednesday after that, after Osaka's post, it was announced that the Western and Southern Open would pause the tournament. Now, we give you this example because some of the most privileged people in this space can do something. You can do something. I consider, as much as I am a Black Muslim woman, I consider myself an extremely privileged Black person because I'm sitting here talking to you about these issues. There are individuals who cannot do this, who cannot advocate for themselves, who cannot speak on these issues, who are too much in the gutter to be able to rise and speak on it. So I carry this privilege, and I carry it with honor and with pride because I've been lucky. Next slide, please. So I'd like to leave you with a few words. You know, this presentation to me and to those of us at the Black North Initiative is an important one to give because it speaks to the Black experience. It speaks to the issues that the Black community faces day in and day out. It speaks to those of us that are unable to speak for ourselves. And when you think back around these numbers, please know that these numbers represent people. They represent people that are just like you and myself and everyone else listening in today. There are people who are trying. There are people who want to live. They don't want to just survive, they want to thrive. And it is a duty of ours as people on this earth to try to do what we can do to support them, to empower them, to uplift them, to make this place we called Earth a better place for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dabo, for your words and your wisdom. I can resonate with many things that you're saying. And the work that I'm doing with the Calgary Foundation, a settler-created philanthropic organization, I'm of the belief that one of the most crucial ways to shift the system is when you address the attitudes and beliefs that have helped to build the infrastructure of that system. And so we have time for one question that sort of speaks to the work that we have to do as a community. And then we'll go into sort of the breakout rooms where we'll emerge some of the other questions. So the question that we have are, from your perspective, which mechanisms can most effectively reduce bias? Just from what we know, awareness of bias doesn't cancel the responsibility that you have to sort of shifting attitudes and beliefs that inform professionals working in these systems, where these systems are contributing to the deficit statistics that you talked about for Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So there's this deep-rooted belief system in our dominant narrative in our society about who we are. And I'll wrap it up here with this thought that even though for some people, the Black Lives Matter movement for social justice has just begun to emerge, we know that we've been sort of doing and fighting this fight for decades, long before the public murders that are taking place. And so how can we begin to address these deep-rooted thought patterns and biases that inform professionals getting into the helping profession?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. This struggle and the fight has started decades ago. There is a sense of awakening that's happening now globally because, and I'll say this quite frankly, it's because the revolution is being televised. That's because we're seeing it everywhere. That's because media is talking about it. This is the only reason why this awakening is happening, because these issues have been there for generations. And so I think that an important mechanism is to not only have the understanding and not only have the acknowledgement, the recognition, but then roll up your sleeves and look at your systems and start to change them one by one by one. When we speak to some of our signatories, it's a very honest and sincere conversation around what are the policies that are in place, whether they have been successful in an environment that wasn't inclusive. That's not the point. The point is, now that you understand that the environment has to change, that the culture of the environment has to change, how are you now going to ensure that that matches your policies and it's going to establish a way of functioning in your organization or company or society that's going to be normal? We're having these conversations and we're sitting down and having these dialogues, but if we had systems that would allow this to happen organically, we wouldn't be having these conversations. I always explain, the context of systemic racism as it's not based on people. It's not, you can have an organization that has 20,000 employees, and you can have 20,000 employees that have checked their bias and that are not racist and that understand what equity and inclusion mean. But your system will continue to disproportionately impact BIPOC communities. That's because it's not based on people, it's based on the infrastructure that they're sitting on. So the foundational work has to be done. It's not about a bad apple. It's not about a specific person. It's not about a specific leader. It's about a system. It requires our leaders and our people within your organization to acknowledge that. But you have to look at the deep roots of this, the legs that this stands on, and they're firm into the ground because they've been there for generations. So don't think that this is going to happen overnight, because it won't. And don't think that it's going to be comfortable, because it won't. But understand that the work that you're doing is going to be so impactful if you do it with honesty and if you do it with the reality that your system is not functional, because it's impacting people differently.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with this work being generational, that it's a characteristic of white supremacy to sort of identify a complex issue and problem and immediately try to find ways to fix or find a solution to that problem. So as much as, and I heard this before from one of my teachers, that as much as we are preparing our children for this world through this work that we're doing, we're also preparing this world for our children. And that's work that's going to be generational. So it has to be weaved into a process. It can't be we can't look at it as a 5-year strategic deadline or a 10-year strategic deadline. It's got to be weaved into the process of our practice and the fabric of our organizations, for sure. So thank you again, Dahabo, for all of your wisdom and your time. I know you are sort of very busy in these times. And I'm just going to throw it over to Nkedi for any other words, or do we go right into the setup for the sharing circles?
Well, thank you. Thank you, Tim. I'm just going to say thank you very much to Habo. That was absolutely magnificent. Those statistics were so alarming, and I don't want to prolong it because I know that we have a production schedule, but thank you very, very much. We really appreciate you taking your time to come and sit here with us and go through these slides and having this really, really critical discussion with us. And I know it's impacted me greatly, but yeah, thank you very much. And I think it's over to Phil now. Thank you so much. Thanks, Tim.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you, everyone. So I want to introduce the breakout groups. So Don, if you could throw up the slide with instructions. For everyone, you're going to want to click on the Join Facilitated Group Discussions. The link is below. What it's going to do is it's going to take you to a Zoom meeting. From there, we'll be divided into small groups and breakout rooms with a facilitator. So be prepared to have your video on and audio on. So maybe get out of your pajamas and put on some dress clothes. And we're going to discuss some questions with the facilitator and your group until about 10:15. At 10:15, we'll have a soul moment with the amazing Bob Chartier. Spoiler alert, there could be some amazing music at that point. And again, between now and then, remember to take a break whenever you need one. So join the Zoom link in the chat below and we'll connect during those discussion rooms. Thanks, everyone. See you in a bit.